Mandalas are immensely complex symbolic structures with many layers of meaning and beauty. Although very beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, mandalas are meant for religious use and are not intended as museum works of art. It is only in recent years that the Dalai Lama has permitted mandalas to be made in public as a means of teaching about the Tibetan culture. The 14th Dalai Lama allowed the first construction of a mandala in the West to be open to the public. His Holiness felt that it would be beneficial to the world as it would enhance the lives of any living beings that were near the construction site. A mandala is thought to bring peace and harmony to the area where it is being constructed. Simply viewing a mandala is believed to be enough to change one's mind stream by creating a strong imprint of the beauty of perfection, as is represented in the mandala itself. As a result of this imprint, one may be able to find greater compassion, awareness, and a better sense of well-being. For your mandala, you're going to need a few supplies in order to properly prep your grid and draw out your mandala design. So we're going to need a protractor. If you have a protractor that is in the round in a circle shape, that is fantastic. But if you only have access to a protractor that is the half style kind of protractor, that's perfectly fine. You'll just do one half of the circle and then you'll line it up and you'll do the other half. But if you have one that's in the full round, it just makes it a little bit easier. Then you'll need a compass, and it doesn't really matter which style of compass that you have, either one works. So compass, of course you'll need a pencil, you'll need some paper to draw on. Size is totally up to you. You're going to want a ruler, an eraser, a fine tip Sharpie for your real intricate detailed lines, and then we're going to want a thicker tipped marker just to fill in so we know what is positive and negative space from when we go to transfer our design onto our clay. So I have just a couple different sizes. So those are the items that you're going to need in order to get started on your mandala. At this point, we're going to grab our pencil, our paper, and our protractor. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is we need to decide how many spaces we want on our mandala design. So for example, this mandala grid is divided into 8 sections. So this will give you an idea of how big your spacing will be. But if you're wanting to make a design that is really detailed, then you might need additional spaces. So you might want to do 12 or 24, or you can go as many as you want depending on how much detail you're going to add. I have found for what we're doing, because we're going to do Sgraffito, that 8 is a good number. So this is super detailed, but this could get a little bit tricky when you go to carve this into clay. But if you are going to do something this detailed, then you're going to want more than 8 spaces. You're going to probably want to be up in that 12 to 18 range. And you can kind of see how this one is split. So for us, to keep it basic and to keep it simple, we're just going to do 8. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trace around my protractor. And I know that my protractor is 360 degrees. So we know it's 360 degrees, and we know that we want to do 8 equal spaces. So then what we're going to do is we're just going to divide 360 degrees by 8. So 360 divided by 8 equals, it should be 45. I don't know what's happening with my computer. 360 divided by 8. There it goes. So, I'm sorry, that should be division there. So 45 degrees. So, I'm sorry, 40. So 45 degrees. So that's going to be what we mark on our protractor here on this paper. And then once you have found 45, you're going to mark it. And at that point, you just add 45. you just do a little bit of math, so then you'll just do 45 plus 45 equals 90. That's going to be your next mark on your paper. And you would continue up from there. So then it would be 135, 180, and you would keep going into your numbers till you're all the way around your protractor. Now let's say that you want to do 12 equal spaces. So you would do 360 divided by 12. So 360 divided by 12 equals 30. And then you would just continue to add 30 to get your additional points that you would mark. So then 90, etc., etc. And you would do that the same way depending on however many spaces that you want. So now that I know that I'm going to do 8 equal spaces, these are going to be my marks. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that to my paper right now. So now that I have my marks all the way around my circle, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to connect these from one side of the circle to the other. Now that I have my grid marked out with my 8 spaces, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add circles of different widths to the inside of my grid. So I'm going to line up my compass where the crosshairs are, and make sure that if you're using a compass like this, you always hold the middle, or else it's going to move on you and you'll have to erase. And you're just going to go through and decide how thick or thin you want these spaces. I like to do a variety. I think it gives it a little bit more interest. I'm going to try to do one in the middle here, but this compass likes to move when you use the middle section. There we go. So now I have a nice grid to go ahead and start my mandala design. So now what you're going to do is you're going to reference your line and shape inventory, and you're just going to build a repeating pattern in a round shape. So we're talking about the element of balance, and balance is, is an even use of elements throughout a work of art, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a mandala. It can be any type of artwork. But symmetry is a really formal type of balance, and it's consisting of like mirroring portions of an image. So whatever is on this side, we want it to mirror on this side. Whatever's here, we want it to mirror here. And for our sake, for a mandala, we're going to create radial symmetry, meaning it's going to be the same all the way around. So whatever we put in this section, we're also going to place here, 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 until we get back to where we've started. And you can build radial symmetry by just repeating basic lines and basic shapes. And the whole time you're doing this, you're creating emphasis. And emphasis consists of drawing attention to one or more points in a work. Normally in a mandala, the focal point is going to start in the middle and it's going to work its way out. So that's how you want to build a repeating pattern inside a mandala. We want to start with the beginning. So oftentimes for beginners, we just start with a simple dot right there where the crosshairs come into play. After that, you just kind of use any kind of shape and any kind of line that appeals to you. For the most part, in most of my drawings, I tend to draw with a really organic kind of feel to everything I tend to draw. Every now and again, something will show up kind of geometric, But for the most part, it's always got kind of this round, organic, inspired and influenced by nature and natural elements. And that's probably what we're going to find in my example that I draw here with you guys. So here's an example that I did this morning, but what I mean by this is everything really has kind of a nice rounded edge to it, with the exception of like this inside point here. Those straight lines would be more geometric. The other thing you want to concentrate on is making sure that your design is cohesive. So that kind of comes with repeating kind of the same elements and the same shapes over and over and over again. If you do that properly, then you will automatically have a cohesive design and it looks like it belongs together, even though when you started, you had no intention of, these different shapes kind of coming together. But somehow, with symmetry and balance and emphasis, that's how you're able to create these amazing cohesive designs. I do want to mention there are lots of resources for mandalas. These books I just picked up at a craft store, but they have designs, that you could use to help influence your mandala design. So those are an option as well. You can probably get them on Amazon or Michael's Craft Store, Hobby Lobby, etc. But what I always tell young artists is maybe don't copy the mandala or the design exactly, because then there's no authenticity to your piece. So maybe pick your favorite elements from a particular design and use that. So for example, I really like how they use these petals. I think that that's really cohesive and organic and something that I could apply to my artwork, but I'm going to leave the rest because I don't want to directly copy this. So maybe as I'm kind of scanning through here, I really like the inside of this one. So I could start with the inside of this one and then build up with this as an influential part of my design. And maybe I really like the swirlies on this one. So with that combo of those three elements, I'm going to end up coming with my very own design, hopefully that's original to me. I apologize, I forgot to hit play, so you are seeing this mandala design in progress, but I simply reference my line and shape inventory to begin the kind of diamond, oval shape, teardrop, I guess, shapes that are coming from that dot that we created in the middle. The other thing I want you to pay close attention to is that I'm trying to be as precise as I can every time I add a line and every time I add a shape. If I feel like it's going to be just a little bit off, I'll take the time to go ahead and measure the space between the different shapes or the different lines and mark that within the grid before I go ahead and I make it concrete. The design will continue to build its way out until you get all the way to the outer ring. Remember, you don't want to make your mandala design overly detailed because you are going to use the Sgraffito technique, and if it gets too tight with too many really intricate areas, then Sgraffito is going to be incredibly difficult when we get to that portion in the clay technique.
mentioned this, but I just want to kind of reiterate that when you're working on your mandala, that you're making sure all of your points, your line, your shapes, they seem to radiate outward from that central dot that we created. Because symmetry is, allowing the observer's eye to easily view, whatever it is that you're creating, whether it's a drawing, a painting, a sculpture. If you're creating some type of symmetry, in our case, it's radial symmetry, you want the symmetry to provide balance in the artwork and make the elements all exist in agreement with one another. And symmetry can help the artist convey a message sometimes. In our case, we're just trying to create that radial balance, that radial symmetry. And symmetry in art is when all the elements of whatever it is you're creating, they balance each other out. So take a minute, pause, kind of look at what you already have drawn. And if it doesn't look like or feel like it's coming from that middle point, then you need to probably stop and readjust some of your shapes, readjust some of your lines that maybe you've already added, or figure out how you can create kind of that feel as you move forward. Just kind of readjust your plan. And that can just be with the shapes that you've already created. Maybe you just need to continue, the same shape somewhere else to make it feel more cohesive. So stop, observe what you already have done, and just take a minute to kind of process that information. You may not realize it, but your brain, it's always working behind the scenes to seek out symmetry whenever you're looking at something. Specifically for us, it's going to be artwork, but we could spend a whole semester talking just about symmetry. It's incredibly vast. We could get into the mathematics of it, the physics of it, the art history of it. But there are several reasons that our brains kind of work in this way. And the first reason is just because we're just hardwired for it. Our ancestors, they probably didn't have a name for it, but they knew that their own bodies were basically symmetrical, and they knew that their predators or prey were basically symmetrical. And that came in handy when they were choosing their mate, catching dinner, trying to avoid being eaten by a hungry pack of wolves or bears. And, it goes all the way back before and when man started, when he appeared on this planet. And that's just kind of something to kind of think about, as you're studying symmetry and you're creating this drawing. It's pretty crazy and interesting that this goes back, long before man was even here. And probably the second reason why symmetry in art is such a big deal is because it has everything to do, like I said before, with the way that the brain processes that information. In the West, we read and write from left to right. And what's weird about that is all of that stuff happens in the right side of our brain. That's where it processes. And so that's really interesting. Although in Japan and in the Magna world of illustration, it is the opposite. And that goes way back into, their ancient culture. It was just the way that scribes were created, and they just kind of held on to that. And that's kind of another whole historical topic that we could get into. But symmetry has always been with us, and it's not going to go anywhere. And it's just a really important topic in the art world for us to kind of really contemplate and study.
Once you have your drawings done, you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to mark where you are going to do your graffiato. So here's two different examples. One I did in Sharpie, so I had a really nice drawing to go with my design that I'll do in ceramics, and then this one is just done in pencil, which is where we're kind of at with the process. But before you start filling it in with pencil or Sharpie, what you're going to want to do is go in and just kind of mark it with either a dot or an X before you start filling. Because if you fill in the wrong spot and then you work your way around your design and you realize, oh my gosh, that's not going to work, I'm going to have an area that's where the white is touching the white or the black's touching the white, and then you lose some of your design, that would be no good and you can't restart. So by just kind of marking it off with a few X's where you want your positive and negative space to kind of appear is going to benefit you in the long run. That way you don't have to start over. So I've already done that. So at this point, now I'm going to go through with my Sharpie, I'm going to outline it, and I'm going to fill it in with color just like this example right here.